Thank you very much for the invitation, and it's always a pleasure to speak here. You know, I've done quite some presentations also in the past, I think at Data Amplify, but another of other conferences. So I suppose most of you know me, and I will try to provide some more insights and to you today, and also help you sharpen the focus on what's important for the coming months. So first of all, let me share my personal vision, right? And I think there is actually no need to share it because I suppose everybody in this room shares it as well. We all know the very complex systems on the left side. We all know the very complex systems on the right side, and we are building the bridge. And we are doing this in a very concrete way with the ESRS expert taxonomy, and the ultimate goal is, of course, to eliminate the printer and the manual error-prone extraction of reports. Why I'm showing this to you again? I think in this time it's very important to highlight and to draw a future and a vision which is positive, not looking at things that could be improved or that are bad or whatever, but giving a positive message to people and a positive vision. So I would like you to also convey this vision, or embrace it, digest it, and convey if you think you would agree with me. Yeah. Just, you know, the legal background usually is very boring, and I don't want to talk about any legal aspect, but to be very clear again, and because there were some confusion in the past, the ESRS XBRL taxonomy, the set 1, is for large listed companies subject to reporting under the CSRD. It is not meant to be used for SMEs, for LSMEs, neither for the LSMEs nor for the voluntary SME standard. There will be separate standards issued by EFRAG, and as you have heard today from Patrick, there has even been a standard been approved for the SMEs recently, and we will accordingly develop digital taxonomies as well, following those standards. There is, of course, some kind of overlap, so we will spend some thoughts on the architecture in terms of how do we are going to reuse elements if possible. Yeah, but it's very clear because in the whole messaging around the ESG reporting under ESRS, it's important to note this taxonomy is not for small entities that we just published on the 30th of August, like Patrick mentioned. Just as a reminder for the timeline, because there were also some confusion in the past, we have completed our job, I put it in quotes, because there's still, of course, some work that needs to be done going forward, and I will share some information on the work plan later. But we have completed our work on the 30th of August by delivering the ESRS taxonomy, and now it's ESMA's turn to actually develop the draft RTS, and from what I've heard, they plan to do it, to publish it in December or January, and there will be a consultation. I'm not sure how long it actually will be, but then after they have produced the final RTS, it needs to be adopted by the European Commission. I put it a question mark if we will have the first taggings for financial year 2025, because we don't know. We don't know what ESMA will put in this draft RTS, but I would like to call everybody to pay attention to this public consultation and also to respond if possible, of course. There were some confusion about the ESAP. The ESAP is an independent project from this digitization, as many of you, of course, know, and it's supposed to be the digital repository. The digital reports, the ESRS sustainability statements, will of course be part of the ESAP, but there is no legal and direct connection between both projects. They are totally independent. Just very important to note. Yeah, we have published a draft taxonomy, and last time, I think, last Data Amplified meeting, I talked about the draft taxonomy. For all of you that don't know what we have actually changed in our final taxonomy, here's a quick overview. We have improved validation rules and, of course, also added a few very basic validation rules, actually. For instance, whenever the standard says you shall disclose your energy consumption in megawatt hours, we do not only provide the information in the element that it's supposed to be an energy item, but we added a validation rule that checks the unit, actually, the XPRL unit is megawatt hours. So very basic stuff, actually, nothing that will overload anybody with more error messages or warnings. It just makes sense. We have added more specific references and including a hyperlink to the ESRS text as well. And you might have noticed that we have an online version of our ESRS standard. So whenever you click on this link, it will jump to the paragraph where the data point is defined. And that's, of course, very useful tool. And I would also call all the software vendors to provide such a functionality in their taxonomy browsers that when you look at the references that you can actually really click the link, and probably it would be burdensome to just copy paste it or something, right? Just clicking on it would be very nice. I think it's common practice. Other taxonomies are doing this since many years already. We provided a lot more attributes, for instance, on the mandatory, voluntary data points, on phasing in even, on conditional data points, all as part of our digital taxonomy. So it's really a powerful way of understanding the standards as well. But, very important notice, please always read the standard. The labels that we have in our taxonomies are just short descriptions or short names of the data points. Those do not come with a full text of the ESRS. I mean, it's quite obvious, but the devil is, of course, in the ESRS text itself. In order to know what you need to disclose, you need to look at the ESRS text, not only on the IG3 or on the XPRL taxonomy labels. Those labels were mainly designed in order to understand it from a user perspective. So when you think about an analyst getting a tagged report and they look at a tagged disclosure, then that's the name that we were putting for each element. There were some improvements for Booleans, of course. We tried to clarify some of them. And we simplified the dimensional modeling. I think this is very much interesting also for those of you that might have used the taxonomy to create a data collection tool for data entry. The dimensional modeling was in particular improved regarding the topical dimensions, which we removed in a number of places in the XPRL taxonomy, and which I think greatly simplify it. Yeah, and last but not least, the narrative XPRL elements has been streamlined as well, but I think we talked about this quite a lot, so no need to go into details. Methodology, we have also covered this last year, the main message Patrick made it also today is we are following strictly the ESRS. We did not add any data point to our XPRL taxonomy, neither did we omit anything. And this is, of course, also what Patrick said, right? How can you, in a digital world, try to cut this XPRL taxonomy when it's exactly representing the ESRS standards itself? It would be quite difficult because you would act like a standard setter by actually removing some granularity that is given in the standard itself. Good. Just one particular point that I think is very important for everybody that has not really looked into the ESRS yet. It's the architecture of the ESRS. And when you first look at the, 250 pages of the ESRS, you might not see it because, I'm an IT expert, and for me it was not obvious that there is an architecture. And in order to facilitate the understanding, and you don't need to really read it now, I try to summarize it here on the slide. So ESRS 2 this part of the ESRS standard is a very important part of it because it's a cross-cutting standard. It provides the minimum disclosure requirements for all the topical disclosures. So it's like it's a little bit like a template, you could say, for all the topical standards. So it has a very important meaning. And inside the ESRS 2, there are concepts defined, two very important concepts. One is the concept of impacts, risks, and opportunities. Impacts and risks and opportunities are individual per company. Every company needs to assess what are the impacts they are causing, what are the risks and opportunities that they have in relationship to sustainability matters. Sustainability matters are climate change, water, pollution, social aspects, and so on. That's a central key disclosure. And every other data point, especially the policies, actions, targets, and metrics are following this IRO. So this is very important to understand. It's a central disclosure, and everything should be linked to this central disclosure. The policy, action, and targets and metrics are actually part of ESRS 2 as well. And I think we have seen this concept also in the past, for instance, in GRI. There are also some similar aspects, but the ESRS makes it a very central disclosure. So everybody that is working with this, please pay attention to this part of the ESRS. It's the most important one. When you have understood the architecture, then it's quite easy actually to digest all the other data points which are related to individual topics. Yeah, of course it means that we also went in new innovative ways to digitize those relationships, right? I just explained that we have a very important relationship between the policies, action, targets, and the IROs, so the impact, risk, and opportunities. And this is something which we also try to digitize, not exactly as part of the XBRL taxonomy. It will be part of the report because those disclosures are kind of individual. I would not say entity specific, but individual per company. So that's why this linking is essential, to link certain disclosures, facts on a fact-to-fact level in the XBRL document to each other. This is something that the taxonomy itself cannot do, right? It can only be done in the report itself. Here's an image that shows it more from a visual perspective. So we start with the topics and subtopics, and of course the materiality assessment on the left, which will lead to a list of IROs, impacts, risks, and opportunities that the company has assessed to be material. And then we have policies potentially addressing, because many of those relationships are optional, right? They're not really mandatory. Addressing the IROs, targets, addressing policies and actions, of course, and resources are supporting those targets. Good. Just another piece of information that I wanted to share with you because it will become very important, and there was also some confusion about this in the past. We have been talking about the different levels in especially in terms of narrative tagging in our taxonomy. You remember Patrick today explained we started with a disclosure objective, and then we have which is a general description of what you need to disclose. And then we have dedicated A, B, C, D, and sometimes even Roman 1, Roman 2, Roman 3 data points. There was a confusion about how to determine a level of an XBRL element. It's very important to note that the level is not determined by the level in the presentation hierarchy of our taxonomy, because as you can easily see, it has a number of abstract elements. And if you start from the top, and then you will end up with a totally different leveling. What counts is actually the reference in the standard itself. So on the very right, in the reference link base, you can see the paragraphs A, B, C, Roman 1, 2, 3, and this is actually what is forming the level. However, Now it's getting complicated. So this is also just to illustrate it, right? We have the level 1, principle-based disclosure requirement. Then there is an objective. And that was also one of the frequently asked questions. Why is this second paragraph not an XBRL element? Because it's just the description of the objective of the general disclosure requirement. So of course, not every paragraph in the ESRS has been translated in an XBRL element. Then we have level 2, which is again principle-based, because it's also a generic disclosure. And then the level 3 are actually precise data points. But now, I mean, this methodology can be applied to, I would say, 80 to 90% of the ESRS, but we have some exceptions. Because sometimes in the standard setting process, we have unfortunately things like paragraph 48, where it says only the undertaking shall disclose, which is not the data point, of course, because the things that come below are the data points. So even if you assume paragraph 48 is level 2, it's not actually level 2, right? It's the one below. That's very important to note, because imagine if you would start with a phasing in, for instance, of the ESRS disclosure requirements, it would be very hard to really know which ones are the level 2 and which ones are the level 3 elements. So this methodology does not work for all the disclosure requirements, unfortunately. I would have loved to change this, but it was too late. The standard was adopted and we couldn't just make those changes. Yeah. So of course, the formatting should not lead to a certain digitization or non-digitization of a disclosure. Yeah, that's my key message here. Good. When we talk about narratives, and I think Patrick also made it very clear today, the level 1s are the large chunks of text. They will potentially span multiple pages in a report. The level 2 and 3, so the detailed ones, I would even avoid 2 and 3 because it's just the detailed ones, right? Those are the ones that are more comparable because those are smaller disclosures, and in terms of narrative, the smaller the disclosure is, the easier it is to understand it and to compare it in the end between different entities. Yeah? And yeah, that's of course a key point, right? That we should not just easily throw overboard. Good, now let's go to a very generic topic. Why is digital reporting actually needed? And I think most of you actually know, you are experts, you know perfectly why it's needed. But I would like to remind you also now why exactly this is needed, because we need to convey this message to the world. Because what is at stake, it is PDF reporting or actual XBRL reporting, and we should really make it very clear to people. And what I'm doing while I'm talking here is I illustrate how a tagging process works. For most of you, it is obvious how this works, right? You have potentially programmed those software tools doing it, and you have done it even yourself. But many people out there have never seen how tagging works. We need to make sure that people understand. There's a whole bunch of mystic around digital tagging. People really have not seen it. So please tell them how it works and that it's not a rocket science to do tagging. Yeah. I made this very simple illustration, because I cannot simply show any tool, right? I don't want to stay independent, right? But this is how you could, for instance, then use a digital tagged report, right? You extract the data from the human readable layer, you can give it to an analyst, and they can make a comparison. As simple as that. We need to convey this message to people to make them understand what we are talking about. I think sometimes in the past we failed to explain how it actually works. Yeah? And now it's our time to do this. Let's also not forget who are the users of those ESRS digital disclosures. Those are not only the investors and the data analysts, but we also have a number of other units that are interested in this data, in those data sets as well, right? Those are, for instance, the business partners of the undertaking, trade unions, social partners, non-governmental organizations, governments themselves, including ESMAs, enforcers, NCAs, all the national enforcers and authorities. They can, of course, use the data themselves as well. We need to tell them, you can use that data as well. Yeah? It's not only for the analyst, third-party analysts out there that we don't know. We should not forget this. Last but not least, Patrick also and John discussed it today on the SMEs. We have been advertising the taxonomy-centric approach, which is of course still a valid approach. And what people need to understand is that with digital taxonomies, you kind of can create a digital template as well. And we will definitely do this for the SMEs. So instead of using the XBRL taxonomy for tagging purposes, you could also do it for data entry by just providing it as a digital template. And then maybe you just click on save and it saves you the XBRL inline, the tagged XBRL instance document. Last but not least, a very simple comparison between XBRL and PDF and paper, right? We need to convey this message. There is a difference because still people think there is not much of a difference, right? And there are also, when I reflected on this, very obvious things that we usually don't consider when we talk about digital tagging, right? I mean, of course, the XBRL taxonomy is a useful tool. We have seen this, of course. It helps to avoid inconsistencies inside the report, because you usually have one element, maybe if you report your water on page 17 and then on 85 as well, and it's the same tag, then of course the inconsistency cannot happen because it's one element, right? The XBRL software would automatically provide you an error message when it's not the same. Inconsistent duplicates. We have a unique identifier which enables comparability. That's what you need, right? You don't have that in PDF or paper. It helps you to navigate to the disclosure in the inline XBRL document. It helps you to extract the data in a database. We have all the metadata. We have the units. We have the precision. We have the context and everything. This is, of course, quite obvious for us because we are experts. But for people that don't know XBRL, that only know paper or PDF, this is a huge benefit because getting the unit right, the comma decimal separator thing, right? Comma dot in US English reports or in European reports. This goes away with XBRL if you do it correctly. Yeah? We can solve it. And it makes auditing easier from my point of view. One very important point, because you can easily know where a disclosure is in the report as an assurance provider. It provides the machine learning data. We have seen this in the panel yesterday, very interesting. It enables the concordance, digital concordance, and this is the mapping that we have been discussing also today and where Stuart will tell us more about, I think also today in his presentation, because we can map XBRL elements. The mappings that we have now between the ESRS and GRI and CDP coming, but also, of course, ISSB, are provided on a human-readable level. We can move this up to an XBRL element mapping layer, and then we can actually achieve something like auto-conversion or querying data on a certain lens, like Patrick describes it, or we could convert, auto-take, whatever we will do in the end with this mapping, right? But it's key. If we don't digitize data, interoperability will be much harder. It reduces the language barrier. Very simple. In EU, we have 24 languages. The ESRS statements will be published in 24 languages. At least for the numerical data and semi-narrative, I can easily read any report. Yeah? But it's not possible when I do it on a paper-based or PDF report, because I need to know the language in order to find the disclosure. Yeah? It also enhances the accessibility for individuals with disabilities, right? Such as those that are visually impaired. Those are all arguments in favor of digitization, and I just wanted to repeat it for you in order to address it later when we have a public consultation on the question of digital tagging of the ESRS disclosures. This slide, I wanted to go back. Oh, that's not possible. How can I go back? A bit too fast, sorry. Yeah, I don't need to present this slide. I think it's quite clear, this is my personal opinion, of course. When we don't have a proper digitization, when we miss the opportunity of digitizing the sustainability reporting, there is, of course, a risk of reputation for the whole entire corporate reporting system in the EU. Yeah, that's my conclusion. Yeah, what's going on at EFRAG in terms of digital for the next or for the next year, actually? So, as I mentioned, we will, of course, work on the digital concordance mechanism together with EFRAG International and the ISSB. We have started to work on a sector EFRAG taxonomy. We started with the oil and gas. You have heard that there will be 35 sectors. And there are, of course, some important architectural decisions that need to be taken. And the ultimate goal of the sectors is to reduce entity-specific disclosures, which is, of course, also in our interest, because we all know that entity-specific disclosures hamper the comparability and are sometimes a pain. We will work on an VSME and LSME taxonomy, and we will also work on a digital template, XBRL-based template, in order to allow SMEs to just fill in the template. We have not decided yet, and we will probably issue a call for support, how exactly this will work, but we will, of course, try to consider what exists and yeah, make something useful and easy. And we will, of course, continue with supporting the ESRS Set 1 digitization. So we are going to issue an FAQ soon because we have a digital mailbox, and some of you have reached out to me as well. We will try to, or we have already summarized all the questions, and we'll provide this FAQ on our webpage. Some of the questions are quite obvious. When is the first time tagging is needed? Will ESMA change the taxonomy? But there are also very technical questions. For instance, how can I use the taxonomy when I want to render it as a template, which require more thought, and there might also be other options doing it, of course, right? We just provide a secretariat view. It's not an official endorsed view from EFRAG. Yeah, there is also the Q&A mechanism from EFRAG. Whenever you have a question not related to the taxonomy itself or to the digitization, but rather to the standard, right? Then you can, of course, use the Q&A mechanism of EFRAG. There are many questions coming in and many questions being answered, and it's also a good implementation guidance, I guess. Going forward, we will also issue new versions of our EFRAG taxonomies, like updates, annual updates, where we get rid of issues or where we just fine-tune in order to better reflect the best practices. Good. Last but not least, how can you, now I want to go back again. How can you support EFRAG? Become friend of EFRAG, of course, right? Share everything that we are sharing on our website or on LinkedIn. Please respond to the public consultation. Please encourage all the users, all the analysts, data providers, ESG rating agencies. If you have any contacts to them, please make them aware of this public consultation happening in December or January. That's very important. Now, time for maybe, do we have still time for one question? Or?
I think there's time for one question, yes. So, who has the question? Not you, Owen. Really? You're going to have to do this really soon. There's got to be a question. Here we go. There we are. There's the question.
Thank you. So great presentation. Please, for me, what I'm doing a lot, I'm exactly educating sustainability reporting professionals on XBRL, ESAF, and the use of XBRL. Well, basically, there is a huge question always, like very frequently, not always, coming to me from the people who are non-users of XBRL regarding certification for the tool. So basically, what we are trying to understand, whether this is mandatory or it's not mandatory? What is EFRAG's positions? Obviously, the question raises from a perspective that non-certified tools are way more cheaper, like 10 times cheaper, it could be or something. So is there any questions in your FAQ coming like that, and what's the answer? Thank
Absolutely.
you.
I think it's one of the top questions, right? Which tool can I use? Do I need to use an XBRL tool? Can I just use a XSLT spreadsheet? Those kind of questions, right? We get a lot. So from my point of view, the XBRL standards are freely available and open and free license, right? And as long as your report that you produce is compliant according to the XBRL specifications, it does not really matter how you have reached this, right? So basically it means you can use any technology, any tool, or whatever works. You can even handcraft it in Notepad++ if you would like to do so. But does it make sense? Yeah. XBRL also comes with some complexity, and I would definitely also recommend companies, of course you need to use a tool, right? There's no debate. You cannot handcraft an XBRL document. It's impossible, right? And when you look for tools, there are of course certain criteria which you might consider, and one is of course certification, because what does the certification tell us? The certification actually tells us that the tool that I'm using is compliant, or let me say, is able to make a compliant report in the terms that it's, for instance, validating according to specifications. And so I will know if this is a compliant report or not in the end when I click the validate button. Yeah? It does not necessarily mean you will always produce a valid one, because it's always also a decision of the person that is sitting in front of the tool if they do the tagging right or not. So it's not such an easy answer, right? But I hope it clarifies a bit, and we also provide it in writing in our FAQ.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you for an excellent presentation.